This week we read Parshat Pekudei, the last Torah portion in the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. And we're going to take a look at the closing words of the book of Exodus, the last words of this week's Torah portion, where after recounting all of the donations given and the construction of the tabernacle, we're told that Moses finally completed the construction of the tabernacle, right, at the end of verse 33 of chapter 40, and Moses completed the work. And then, after the work was complete, it says that the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the Mishkan. Let's fast forward. And verse 36, when the cloud rose up from over the Mishkan, the children of Israel set out in all their journeys. But if the cloud did not rise up, they did not set out until the day that it rose. And the final verse, for the cloud of the Lord was upon the Mishkan by day, and there was fire within it at night, before the eyes of the entire house of Israel in all their journeys. So what the verses are telling us is that Moshe completes the work, and God's presence is manifest in the Mishkan by way of as presented in this cloud that descends onto the Mishkan. So much so we skip verse 35, where it says that Moses was unable to enter the Mishkan, the tabernacle, because of the cloud that had descended upon it. Rashi discusses how he was able to enter and so on. But when the cloud rested on the Mishkan, we knew God's presence was resting there in that space. And when the cloud rose, the cloud lifted, that's when the people knew it was time to travel. Right? So verse 36 says, when the clouds rose up, the children of Israel set out in all their journeys. Right? And if it didn't, as verse 37 says, then they stayed. As long as the cloud was on the Mishkan, everybody stood still, they camped, and they stayed in their position. But once the cloud would arise up over the Mishkan, they knew it was time to go, and they would follow the cloud to their next destination. But the last verse 33, says that the cloud of the Lord was upon the Mishkan by day. There was a fire within it at night, before the eyes of the entire house of Israel in all their journeys. So we said in verse 36 that when the cloud rose, that's when they traveled. When the cloud was present in the Mishkan, they didn't travel. And yet here, verse 38 seems to contradict it by saying that when the cloud was on the Mishkan in all their travels, but it wasn't actually in all their travels; it was in all their encampments when they were stationed. That's when the cloud descended on the Mishkan, as we just said. So what's going on here? So let's look at Rashi. Rashi says in the last words here, before the eyes of the entire house of Israel in all their journeys. On every journey that they were traveling, the cloud would rest in that place where they encamped. The place of their encampment is also called a journey. Likewise, he went to his stations. Went to a few parallels from the verses, i.e., to the stops along his journey. And likewise, these are the journeys, right? So we see two other places where encampments, where camping is considered a journey, called a journey. And Rashi concludes, since from the place of their encampment they resume their journeys, they're all called journeys. Right? The whole point of the encampment was a pause in the journey, and then they would continue the journey. So the encampment served sort of as a preparation for the journey, and so therefore even the encampment could be considered part of the journey and called a journey. So when the verse says that the cloud descended and was over the Mishkan and all their journeys, it means their encampments, and the encampment is part of the journey. Now, this idea brings to mind, like the sages tell us that one who eats on the day before Yom Kippur, so it's as if he fasted for 2 days, right? There's like this obligation we have to eat the day before Yom Kippur. So the technical reason for it is similar to what Rashi is saying here, which is in order to fast in Yom Kippur, you need to eat the day before. So since the eating is preparing you for the fasting, so already even the eating could be considered fasting, right? Because it's a preparation for what follows, and since it's leading into it and facilitating it, making it possible, so it becomes part of it as well. And so by eating on the day before Yom Kippur, it's as if you fasted for 2 days. Now, life, we know, of course, is a journey. And we're told, the prophet tells us that what distinguishes man from angels is that we are constantly in motion, or we have at least the capacity to be in motion. Angels stand still. They are in one place. They are in one station. They are who they are, and they don't grow. They don't change. Humanity has this capacity to grow. God says, right, the prophet says, we are movers among those who stand still, because we can constantly grow. In fact, it's innate to our human nature, right? Like Ecclesiastes says that what separates man from animal, for instance, also is the animal goes down. Man is always looking, his spirit is always rising up, always looking to get better, to improve, to transcend. That is the nature of man. And that would be life being a journey, right? It's a journey. We're constantly growing, constantly evolving, hopefully deepening all of our experiences, maturing, and so on and so forth. So being in a state of growth, that is movement. You're moving. Sometimes in life, we plateau, or we hit a speed bump and we stop. We get stuck in a certain place. And so you think that being stuck in a certain place, that is a detour, or that is a temporary step back from that journey, from progressing. Now, the Jewish people in general also were constantly in motion, right? Exile is all a journey to the promised land of the redemption. And so any good thing we do, everything that we do that's positive, that facilitates and brings the redemption closer, we're on that march towards redemption. All of history also marching towards that redemption. Sometimes we stand still. Sometimes we think that either we're not looking to move forward, or we're happy where we are. And we get stuck in a rut, or stuck in a certain comfort where we don't feel like we're marching towards that destination. And this is a lesson that we can learn from the closing of this week's Torah portion, which is that one might think that when I'm in motion, when I'm journeying, when I'm improving, when I'm deepening my experience, when I'm adding to my Jewish practice, when I'm growing spiritually and growing emotionally, then of course I'm on the path of life. Then I'm living my best life. I am journeying and doing the right thing. But when I'm standing still, when I'm comfortable and complacent, then I've stepped out of that journey. I've stepped out of the journey of life. And so when a person's journeying, when you're on the move, even if it's a little uncomfortable, but you're pursuing something, right? And so think about the Mishkan, where the cloud rises, goes up off of the tabernacle, and the people start to follow the cloud. You're following God, right? Is he within you? Of course, he's sort of burning within you in the sense that you are pursuing him. You're following him to the unknown destination that he's leading. You're going to follow him to wherever he takes you. So that implies that connection, that relationship. But what happens when you stand still? What happens when you've camped? You're comfortable. You're in a spot. You're not pursuing anything higher at this moment. You don't have that burn to follow God. Is God still with you? Is he in the camp? And so this is the message from the end of the book of Exodus, that even in those places where we might feel stationary, where we don't feel like we're moving, we're not acting as the spirit of the human being, which is to rise higher. We're not differentiating ourselves from angels, if you want to look at it from the other side, right? With movement and growth. We're standing still, we've plateaued, we're stuck. Maybe that's God's not with us. And so the Torah tells us no, that even being in the place that you're in, even if you're stationary, even in those moments, even if you don't feel like you're growing, and maybe even you feel like you're going backwards, even there, God rests in all of their journeys. All of that is part of your journey. So it's not just your steps forward. It's not just your good days that bring you closer to the destination. It's even sometimes the steps backwards. It's even sometimes those steps where we are missteps. All of that leads us to the destination. And so that's why the Torah tells us, referring to the encampment as journeys, to know that everything that happens in our life, we're constantly on this journey of life towards the promised land. And since we're coming up to Purim, it's just 2 weeks away. The Talmud asks about the Jewish people, why they faced such a terrible threat of a complete genocide and an annihilation of the entire Jewish people. And one of the answers given, it's not the conclusion of the Talmud, but that they delighted in the feast of Achashverosh. That the king made this feast, and they were comfortable there. And what's interesting is that one of the ways of understanding this statement is that the Jewish people, for the first time, are in exile. They're not in the promised land. They're not in the Holy Land. They don't have a temple. They're in exile. They seemingly are at the mercy of a foreign government and power. And so they felt that they need to curry favor with the local government. They need to play politics. And like that, they will secure their safety. Now, what happens is, of course, God says, if that's how you want to behave, you want to put your trust in a king of flesh and blood, then go ahead and see how that works out for you. And so that's why suddenly this decree comes and faces them. It's simply a consequence of them feeling that their fate lies in the hands of a human being and not completely in God. But the truth is that what happens is, the way the story plays out, of course they return to God. But we discover that even in that experience, even as they are benefiting from from Achashverosh, even as they seem to be comfortable and complacent in exile, without this deep yearning necessarily to follow God, to pursue God, and they're putting their trust in others, even so, God dwells within them. The whole story of the Megillah, the story of Purim, is that even in our lowest, in our very low selves, even when we're not our best selves, even there we're connected to God. Even there, God is with us, and even there, God burns within us. And hopefully, if we can attune ourselves to that inner connection, that fire will burn and propel us forward to the journey where we finally end up all together in the promised land.